Racist boy pulls black teacher's hair, but she was a war hero. Desiree Johnson took a deep breath as she felt the pain of the violent pull on her coily hair. The silence in the classroom was deafening, broken only by the mean giggles of some students and the quiet crying of others who knew this was wrong. The 8-year-old blonde boy was still holding a strand of her hair in his small hand, his blue eyes shining with a learned malice. Ethan Reynolds hadn't been born that way. Someone had planted that hatred in his young heart, and Desiree knew exactly who. "Monkey teacher," the boy shouted, repeating words that clearly weren't his own. "My grandma said you shouldn't be here." Desiree closed her eyes for a moment, and her mind flew away from that classroom at Frederick Douglass Elementary School on the outskirts of Oakland. For an instant, she was back in the scorching heat of Haiti in 2010, carrying a wounded soldier through the destroyed streets of Port-au-Prince. The cruel words of an 8-year-old child were nothing compared to the sound of gunfire and the screams of pain she had heard during her peacekeeping mission. When she opened her eyes, she saw the frightened face of Destiny Williams, a 7-year-old black girl who always sat in the front row. Tears streamed down her small face, and Desiree realized the child wasn't just crying for what she had witnessed. She was crying because she saw her own future reflected in that moment. "Ethan, sit down," said Desiree with a calm voice that even impressed herself. "Let's talk about this." "I don't want to sit down," the boy yelled, throwing the strand of hair on the floor. "You can't tell me what to do. My grandma is going to come here and put you in your place." The classroom door swung open abruptly, and Margaret Thompson, the school principal, entered with a face red with anger. But Desiree soon realized the anger wasn't directed at the boy who had just physically and verbally assaulted her. "Ms. Johnson, I need to speak with you," said Margaret, avoiding looking at Ethan. "In my office. Now." Desiree looked at her third-grade class, 28 children between 7 and 9 years old, most of them from low-income families in the area. Some black like Destiny Williams, others mixed race, a few white like Ethan, all watching how the adults would handle this situation, which would define much of what they would learn about justice and respect for the rest of their lives. "Jasmine," Desiree said to the oldest student in the class, "you're in charge of the class. Do the activity on page 42. I'll be right back." In the principal's office, Desiree didn't even get a chance to sit down. Margaret started talking before she even closed the door. "Ms. Johnson, I understand the situation was unpleasant, but we need to think about the well-being of all the children," the principal began, organizing papers on her desk to avoid eye contact. "Ethan is going through a difficult time at home. His parents recently separated and he's living with his grandparents. And that justifies what he did?" asked Desiree, unconsciously touching the spot where her hair had been pulled. "Of course it doesn't justify it. But perhaps it would be better to transfer you to another class. The 4th grade B class needs a substitute teacher." "Transfer? Me?" Desiree's voice was louder than she intended. "Margaret, are you suggesting I be transferred because a child assaulted me?" "It's not exactly like that." Margaret finally looked up. "It's just that Ethan's grandparents are very traditional people. They could cause problems for the school if they think we're being partial. And you know how these things are." Desiree knew exactly how these things were. She had grown up knowing. She had spent her entire life knowing. But during the years she served as an army doctor, she had believed things were changing, that her daughter would grow up in a different world, the daughter who never returned from the same peacekeeping mission where Desiree had saved dozens of lives. "I'm not leaving my class," said Desiree, surprising the principal with the firmness in her voice. "Those children need to see that behavior like this has consequences, and that people like me also have rights. Miss Johnson, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable, Margaret. What's not reasonable is an 8-year-old child physically assaulting a teacher, and the administration considering transferring the victim instead of dealing with the aggressor." Margaret sighed and sat down heavily in her chair. "His grandparents have already called. They're on their way here now, and from the yelling I heard on the phone, they are not happy at all." "Good," said Desiree. "I would very much like to speak with them." 40 minutes later, Desiree was sitting in the conference room next to Margaret, waiting for Ethan's guardians to arrive. Through the window, she could see the boy in the playground playing by himself while other children avoided him. For a moment, she felt sorry for him. He was just a child repeating what he learned at home. The door swung open forcefully, and an elderly couple entered the room as if it were an invasion. The man, tall and thin, was about 70 years old and carried a military posture that Desiree recognized immediately. The woman, a few years younger, wore a floral dress and had her grey hair pulled back into a tight bun. "I am Richard Reynolds," said the man, without greeting anyone. "And this is my wife, Margaret. We're here to pick up our grandson and settle this nonsense once and for all." "Mr. Reynolds," began Margaret, "I'm glad you came. We can talk about what happened today." "What happened," interrupted Margaret, pointing an accusing finger at Desiree, "was that this woman did something to provoke my grandson. Ethan is a sweet, well-behaved boy. He would never do what you're saying without a very good reason." Desiree felt her blood boil, but she forced herself to remain calm. Years of military training had taught her the importance of strategy over impulsive reaction. "Mrs. Margaret," said Desiree calmly, "your grandson physically and verbally assaulted me in front of 28 other children. He pulled my hair, called me a monkey, and said I shouldn't be here." "That's a lie," shouted Margaret. "My grandson would never use those words." "The words he used," continued Desiree, ignoring the interruption, "are not words an 8-year-old child naturally knows. They are words he learned somewhere, from someone." The silence in the room was broken only by the sound of Richard's heavy breathing. Desiree watched the man's face, noticing the tension in his jaw and the way his hands clenched into fists. "What are you implying?" he asked, taking a step toward Desiree. "I'm not implying anything," she replied, remaining seated and calm. "I'm stating clearly that your grandson learned this behavior and these words from adults, and since you are the only adults he lives with daily—" "That's enough!" yelled Margaret. "We are not going to sit here and listen to accusations from a person like that." "A person like what?" The question was out of Desiree's mouth before she could stop it. The embarrassment on Margaret's face was so obvious that even Margaret shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Richard ran a hand through his grey hair and sighed heavily. "Look here," he said, trying to use a more controlled tone. "We are not prejudiced people, but we believe that certain situations are best avoided, especially when they involve young children." "And what situations would those be?" insisted Desiree. "Situations where very big differences can cause misunderstandings." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. Margaret tried to intervene. "Maybe we can find a solution that works for everyone." "The solution," said Richard, "is to transfer our grandson to a class where he feels more comfortable." "Or transfer the teacher," added Margaret quickly. "Interesting," said Desiree, crossing her hands on the table. "Your grandson assaults me, and the solution is to transfer either him or me. At no point have you considered the possibility of talking to him about respect and consequences." "We know how to raise our grandson," Richard replied curtly. "Do you?" Desiree stood up slowly. "Because the result of your parenting is an 8-year-old child who physically assaults an adult woman because of the color of her skin. If that's the result of the upbringing you provide, maybe it's time to rethink your methods." Richard's face turned purple with anger. "You have no right to talk about our parenting. You know nothing about us, about our family, about our values. I know your values include teaching a child to hate people she doesn't even know," Desiree shot back. "And I know you're more concerned with protecting your prejudice than protecting your grandson's future." "That's absurd," shouted Margaret. "We love Ethan more than anything." "Loving a child means preparing them to live in the real world," said Desiree. "And the real world has people of all colors, all backgrounds, all religions. If you teach Ethan to hate half the US population, you will be limiting his future, not protecting it." "We don't teach hate," protested Richard. "We teach tradition, family, values." "What values?" Desiree's voice was getting firmer. "The value of judging people by their skin color, The value of assaulting those who are different? The value of thinking that certain people are less than others? Enough! Richard slammed his fist on the table. We're not going to sit here and be attacked by this... by you. Let's go, Margaret. And Ethan is not coming back to this school. Richard, wait, said Margaret, trying to control the damage. Let's talk calmly. I'm sure we can reach an agreement. There is no agreement, said Margaret, grabbing her purse. Our lawyer will be in touch with you. We're going to sue this school for allowing teachers to attack respectable families. Desiree watched the couple leave the room and felt a mixture of sadness and determination. She had dealt with much worse situations during her military career, but that didn't make it any less frustrating to see hatred being passed from one generation to the next. Ms. Desiree, said Margaret after the door closed, I understand your position, but perhaps you were a little harsh with them. Harsh? Desiree turned to face her. Margaret, an 8-year-old child called me a monkey and pulled my hair. When I talk to his guardians, I discover they see no problem with his behavior, and I was harsh. It's just that they are older people, more traditional. Being old is no excuse for being prejudiced, Desiree interrupted. And being traditional doesn't mean teaching hate. My grandmother was 90 when she passed, as traditional as they come, but she taught me that respect for people came before anything else. Margaret sighed and leaned back in her chair. What do you want me to do? The parents really can sue the school. And if they transfer Ethan, other parents might do the same. We can't afford to lose students. You're afraid of losing racist students? I'm afraid of losing my job, Margaret replied honestly, and of the school closing. You know how hard it is to keep a public school running these days. Desiree understood Margaret's position, but that didn't make the situation any less painful. For years, she had served her country, had risked her life to protect people she didn't even know, had lost her own daughter in the line of duty, and now she was being treated as if she were the one causing problems for refusing to accept racist abuse. I'm going back to my class, said Desiree, and I'm going to keep doing my job. If the Reynolds family wants to sue someone, let them sue, but I'm not going to run away because a prejudiced family got uncomfortable. Desiree. Margaret, with all due respect, you need to decide what kind of school you want to run. One where children learn that respect and equality are important values, or one where prejudice is tolerated so as not to upset certain families. Desiree left the office and walked through the empty school hallways. It was recess, and the children were in the yard. Through the windows she could see Ethan sitting alone on a bench, while the other children played at a distance. For a moment her heart ached for the boy. He was just a child repeating behaviors he learned at home. But then she remembered Destiny's face, the girl's tears, the fear in her eyes, and she remembered all the other children in the classroom who had witnessed the assault. What would they learn if Ethan's behavior had no consequences? What would the black children learn about their own worth? What would the white children learn about respecting others? Desiree entered the teacher's lounge and found Karen, her co-worker, having coffee. So, asked Karen, how did it go with Ethan's grandparents? Just as you'd imagine, replied Desiree, pouring herself some coffee. They think their grandson is an angel, and that I'm to blame for everything. Oh, Joe, Karen shook her head. Unfortunately, it's not the first time I've seen this happen. Some parents, well, you know how it is. I do, but that doesn't mean we should accept it. Of course not. But sometimes it's easier to just let it slide. Pick your battles, you know. Desiree looked at Karen, a 50-year-old white woman who had worked at the school for over 20 years. She was a good teacher, dedicated and caring with the children. But there was something in her words that deeply bothered Desiree. Let it slide, repeated Desiree. Karen, an 8-year-old child physically and verbally assaulted me because of my skin color. Is that something we should let slide? No, of course not. Karen hurried to correct herself. That's not what I meant. It's just that sometimes it's better not to make a big fuss. You know how things are around here. If you upset certain families... Certain families? Desiree sat down in front of Karen. What families are those that can't be upset when their children assault teachers? Karen looked down and stirred her cup uncomfortably. You know what I mean, Joe. The Reynolds family is well known in the area. Richard has connections, influence. They're not a family you want as an enemy. And am I a family that can be an enemy? Asked Desiree. I'm a certified teacher with a postgraduate degree, a veteran of the US Army who served in international peacekeeping missions. But I'm the one who needs to hide when I'm assaulted. It's not that. It is that, Karen. You're telling me I should silently accept racist abuse so as not to upset influential people. You're telling me my dignity is worth less than the school's political convenience. The silence stretched between them until the bell signaling the end of recess rang. Karen stood up quickly, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. I need to get back to my class, she said. Joe, I didn't mean to offend you. It's just that you know how it is. Desiree was left alone in the teacher's lounge, reflecting on Karen's words. You know how it is. Everybody always knew how it was. Racism was always something everyone knew existed, but nobody wanted to confront directly. She thought of her daughter, Jasmine, who had enlisted in the US Army following in her mother's footsteps. Jasmine had grown up believing she could be anything she wanted to be, that her color shouldn't limit her dreams, and she had chosen to serve her country, just like her mother. Jasmine never returned from Haiti. Desiree shook her head, pushing away the painful memories. She couldn't let grieving for her daughter interfere with her ability to fight for what was right. Jasmine had given her life-serving values of equality and justice. Giving up now would dishonor her memory. When she returned to the classroom, she found her students quiet and tense. It was obvious they had been talking about what had happened. Ethan wasn't there. Ms. Johnson, said Jasmine, the oldest student. Where's Ethan? He went home, Desiree replied simply. Is he coming back? Asked Destiny Williams in a small voice. Desiree looked at the girl's face and saw her own doubts reflected there. Destiny was wondering if what had happened meant that children like them weren't welcome in certain places. She was wondering if having dark skin meant she should accept poor treatment in silence. I don't know if he's coming back, Desiree said honestly, but if he does, he'll need to learn to treat all people with respect. Why did he do that, Ms. Johnson? Asked Jamal, an 8-year-old biracial boy. It was a difficult question to answer for such young children. How do you explain centuries of prejudice and hatred taught from generation to generation? How do you explain that some people learn to hate others without even knowing them? Sometimes, said Desiree, sitting at her desk, people learn wrong things when they're little, and when they grow up, they teach those wrong things to their children and grandchildren. It's like a chain that gets passed from one person to another. But how do we break that chain? Asked Jasmine. The 9-year-old girl's question surprised Desiree. It was a question that much older and supposedly wiser people couldn't answer. By learning to treat all people with respect, she replied. By not judging people by their skin color, their religion, or where they were born. By getting to know people before deciding if we like them or not. And if someone doesn't want to learn? Asked Destiny Williams. Desiree looked at the girl and saw tears in her dark eyes. She was asking the most important question of all. Then we keep treating those people with respect, said Desiree. But we don't accept them disrespecting us. We show them that we are good, intelligent people, capable of anything, and we hope that one day they'll see that. And if they never see it, insisted Destiny, then at least other people will see it, replied Desiree. And when you grow up, you'll teach your children to treat everyone with respect, and so the chain gets broken little by little. The rest of the afternoon passed without incident, but Desiree noticed the children were quieter than normal. What had happened that morning had affected them deeply, and she knew it would take time for them to return to normal. When the final bell rang and the children left, Desiree stayed alone in her classroom, organizing materials and reflecting on the day. She was tired, not physically, but emotionally. Dealing with prejudice always left her exhausted. Her cell phone rang and she saw her mother Eleanor's name on the screen. Hi, Mom. Hi, honey, how was your day? Desiree hesitated. Her mother, at 68, had spent her life facing similar situations. She had been one of the first black women to graduate from nursing school in her hometown, had raised 5 children alone after her husband left, and had faced decades of prejudice with a dignity that had always inspired Desiree. It's complicated, Mom, she admitted. A student assaulted me today, physically and verbally. What do you mean, honey? Desiree told her mother the whole story, from the incident to the meeting with Ethan's grandparents. Eleanor listened silently, making only a few sounds of disapproval. And now? Asked Eleanor when Desiree finished. Now I just keep doing my job, replied Desiree, and hope things work themselves out somehow. You did the right thing, honey, Eleanor said firmly. You can't let something like this slide. If you let it slide, the children will learn that it's acceptable to treat people that way. I know, Mom, but it's hard. The principal is afraid of trouble. The other teachers think I should just let it go. And what do you think? I think I can't let it go, not for me, but for all the children who were in that classroom, especially for the black children who saw it happen. Then you already know what to do, said Eleanor. It's going to be hard, but you're strong. You always have been. Remember when you wanted to join the army and everyone said it was crazy? Desiree smiled for the first time that day. Her mother was right. She had faced much worse things and had survived. I remember, Mom. And remember when you came back from Haiti and didn't want to leave the house anymore? Her mother's question brought back painful memories. Desiree had returned from Haiti destroyed by the loss of Jasmine. She had spent months locked away at home, unable to deal with the pain and guilt. I remember. And who was it that convinced you to start living again, to find a new purpose? You, Mom. And what was the purpose you found? Teaching, helping children grow up better than the previous generation. So, said Eleanor, you already know why you can't give up now. Those children need you, all of them, even the boy who assaulted you. Desiree felt reinvigorated by the conversation with her mother. Eleanor always knew how to find the right words in difficult times. Thank you, Mom. You're welcome, honey. And if you need anything, you can call me. I'll be here. After the call, Desiree finished tidying her classroom and went home. She lived alone in a small but comfortable apartment, decorated with photos from her time in the military, and some items she had brought back from Haiti. It was a quiet home, but she had learned to appreciate the solitude after losing Jasmine. That night, as she prepared dinner, Desiree reflected on what had happened. The incident with Ethan wasn't an isolated case. Throughout her 3 years working at that school, she had witnessed several smaller episodes of prejudice, but she had always managed to handle them through conversations and educational activities. This time was different. The assault had been public, violent, and clearly motivated by racial hatred, and the family's reaction showed there was no intention of change or remorse. The next morning, Desiree arrived at school early, as she always did. She liked these quiet moments before the children arrived, when she could organize her lessons and mentally prepare for the day. Margaret appeared in her classroom first thing, carrying a cup of coffee and a worried expression. Desiree, can we talk? Of course, replied Desiree, continuing to organize the books on her desk. The Reynolds called last night, Margaret began. They've withdrawn Ethan from the school permanently, and they've hired a lawyer. Desiree stopped organizing the books and looked at the principal. A lawyer for what? They want to sue you for emotional distress and the school for negligence. They say you verbally attacked an 8-year-old child and that the school allowed it. Emotional distress? Desiree almost laughed. Margaret, are they serious? Apparently, yes. The lawyer has already contacted the Department of Education. They want a formal inquiry to investigate your conduct. Desiree sat down heavily in her chair. An inquiry could ruin her career. Even if she was cleared, the investigation would be on her record forever. What did the department say? That they will review the case, replied Margaret, avoiding looking Desiree in the eye. And that in the meantime it might be best for you to take a medical leave, just until things are resolved. A medical leave? Desiree stood up abruptly. Margaret, are you sidelining me for being a victim of a racial assault? It's not a suspension, it's just a precaution. It is a suspension, interrupted Desiree. You're taking me out of the classroom because a racist family was upset that I defended myself. Desiree, try to understand my position. I understand your position perfectly, said Desiree, picking up her bag. And I also understand that you chose to protect the family that practices prejudice instead of protecting the teacher who was assaulted. That's not it. That is it, Margaret, and you know it. Desiree left the school that morning feeling betrayed and furious. She had served her country with honor. She had dedicated her life to education after losing her daughter, and now she was being treated as if she were the criminal. At home, she called the teachers' union and explained the situation. The representative who answered, a woman named Kimberly, was outraged by the case. Ms. Johnson, this is absurd, said Kimberly. You were the victim of a racial assault and you're being punished for it. We will file a complaint against the school and against the family immediately. And in the meantime? In the meantime, unfortunately, you will have to wait. These processes can take months to be resolved. Desiree hung up the phone feeling lost. For the first time since she had decided to become a teacher, she questioned if she had made the right choice. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. During the following days, Desiree tried to keep herself busy at home, but it was difficult. She was used to the school routine, the noise of the children, the daily challenge of teaching. The silence of her apartment began to feel heavy. On Wednesday, she received an unexpected call. It was Karen, her co-worker. Joe, can you talk? Of course, Karen. It's about what happened. Karen sounded nervous. The kids in your class are asking where you are, especially Destiny Williams. She's been crying every day. Desiree's heart tightened. Since she had become a teacher, her biggest concerns had always been her kids. Knowing that Destiny was suffering because of her was almost unbearable. What are you telling them? Margaret told us to say you're sick. But the kids aren't stupid, Joe. They know it has something to do with what happened with Ethan. And how are they reacting? Destiny has become very withdrawn. She doesn't participate in activities. She doesn't play during recess. I think she's blaming herself for what happened. Why would she blame herself? You know how it is, Joe. Kids think differently. She might be thinking that if she weren't black, none of this would have happened to you. Desiree closed her eyes, feeling the pain of those words. A 7-year-old girl was blaming herself for existing, for being born with dark skin. She was learning that being black brought negative consequences for the people she loved. Karen, can you do me a favor? Of course. Can you tell Destiny that I didn't leave because of her, that I'm okay and that I'll be back soon? I can, but, Joe, when are you coming back? I don't know, admitted Desiree. It depends on the investigation. This is so unfair, said Karen. I keep thinking, if it were me, if a white child had hit me, would it be different? Karen's question surprised Desiree. It was the first time her colleague had openly acknowledged the racial component of the case. What do you think, Karen? I think it would be very different, she answered honestly. And that makes me ashamed. Ashamed of myself, of the school, of our society. Don't be ashamed of yourself, Karen. You didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong, but I didn't do anything right either, said Karen. When you talked to me about choosing your battles, I should have supported you unconditionally. Instead, I thought about my own convenience first. Karen. No, Joe. Let me talk. I've worked at this school for 20 years. I've seen dozens of situations involving prejudice being swept under the rug, and I always thought that was for the best, that it was better not to make waves. But when I saw what happened to you, when I saw how Destiny is suffering, I realized that my silence is also a form of violence. Desiree was moved by Karen's words. Sometimes the biggest victories came from unexpected places. Thank you, Karen. That means a lot to me. Joe, there's one more thing I need to tell you. What? Some parents are organizing a petition asking for your return. It started with Destiny's mother, but there are already more than 15 families supporting it. Desiree felt surprised and moved. She hadn't expected support from the parents. Really? Really, and there's more. Mrs. Letitia, Carlos's mother, you know her. She said something interesting. She said she always knew Ethan's family was prejudiced, but she had never witnessed anything so explicit. and that she was proud of the way you handled the situation. She said that? She did. In fact, she said you were an example for the children. You showed that we shouldn't accept disrespect, but also that we should react with dignity, not with violence. Desiree felt a little better after the conversation with Karen. Knowing she had the support of colleagues and parents made a difference, but she was still far from solving her problem. On Friday, she received a call from the Department of Education, scheduling a hearing for the following week. It was the formal beginning of the investigation process. "Ms. Johnson," said the department employee, "you have the right to be accompanied by a lawyer and a union representative." "I understand. Can I know what the exact accusation is?" "The family alleges inappropriate conduct in the treatment of a minor verbal aggression and creating a hostile environment in the classroom." Desiree almost laughed at the irony. She, who had been assaulted, was being accused of creating a hostile environment. "And what is the procedure?" "You will be heard, as well as witnesses from both sides. After that, a committee will evaluate the facts and issue a report." "How long could this take?" "Between 3 and 6 months, depending on the complexity of the case. 6 months away from the classroom. 6 months without being able to do the work she loved, without being able to be with her kids." Desiree felt a deep anger growing in her chest. Over the weekend, she received an unexpected visit. It was Tamika, Destiny's mother. "Ms. Johnson," said the black woman in her 30s, standing at the door of her apartment, "I hope you don't mind the visit." "I got your address from the school office." "Of course I don't mind, Tamika," replied Desiree, inviting her in. "How is Destiny?" Tamika sat on the sofa and sighed heavily. "Bad, teacher. Very bad. She doesn't want to go to school anymore. She says she's afraid something bad will happen to the next teacher, too." Desiree's heart broke upon hearing that. "Tamika, can you explain to her that what happened wasn't her fault?" "I'm trying, ma'am, but she's just a child. And—" Tamika hesitated. "To be honest, I'm scared too." "Scared of what?" "Scared that she'll grow up thinking her place in the world is to silently accept humiliation. Mom, I grew up hearing my mother say, 'Don't make trouble,' whenever I complained about a situation involving prejudice. And I grew up thinking it was my duty to keep my head down. And now? Now I see my 7-year-old daughter learning the same thing, and I don't want that for her. When you stood up to those prejudiced grandparents, when you said you wouldn't accept what happened, you showed my daughter that she doesn't have to accept it either." Desiree felt moved by Tamika's words. "Thank you for telling me this. Ma'am, I came here because I want you to know that you have our full support. Me, my husband, and more than 20 families have already signed a document asking for your return, and if necessary, we'll protest in front of the school." "Tamika, you don't have to—" "Yes, we do," she interrupted. "Do you know why? Because my daughter asked me yesterday if she could be born again, but white this time. A 7-year-old child asked me that, and I didn't know what to say." Desiree felt the tears burning her eyes. That mother's pain was palpable, and she knew exactly how Tamika felt. "You can tell her that being black is beautiful," said Desiree softly, "that she comes from a line of strong, courageous women, that her skin color doesn't define what she can or cannot be in life." "I tell her that every day," replied Tamika, "but it's hard when the world always seems to be saying the opposite. That's why we need teachers like you, someone who shows our children that they can be respected, that they can take up space, that they can stand up for themselves when necessary." The two talked for over an hour. Tamika talked about her own experiences with racism, about the fears she had for her daughter's future, about the importance of having positive role models. "Mom, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Do you have children?" Desiree hesitated before answering. She didn't like talking about Jasmine, especially because the pain was still very intense. "I had a daughter," she finally said. "Jasmine, she is no longer with us." "I'm so sorry," said Tamika, realizing she had touched on a sensitive subject. "She was in the military, like I was. She died on duty in Haiti during a peacekeeping mission." "Oh, ma'am, I didn't know. I'm truly sorry." "Thank you," said Desiree. "That's why I became a teacher. After I lost Jasmine, I wanted to find a way to keep making a difference in children's lives. And your children, all of them, gave me a new purpose. That's why you fight so hard for them." "That's why I fight so hard for them," confirmed Desiree. "Every child in my classroom is important to me. Every single one of them deserves respect, opportunities, love. And I won't let them learn that they are worth less because of their skin color." Tamika got up to leave, but before she did, she turned to Desiree. "Ma'am, I wanted you to know something. Yesterday, Destiny was playing teacher with her dolls, and you know what she said?" "What?" "She said, 'You have to treat everyone the same because everyone is a person.' She learned that from you." After Tamika left, Desiree felt more determined than ever. She wasn't just fighting for herself, but for all children like Destiny, who needed to see that they were valuable and deserved respect. On Monday, she attended the hearing at the Department of Education, accompanied by Kimberly, her union representative, and a union lawyer. The meeting room was cold and formal, with a large table in the center where the committee members sat. 3 Department of Education officials Desiree didn't know. On the other side were the Reynolds family with their lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who seemed unnecessarily aggressive from the very start. "This hearing," began the committee chairman, a bald man of about 60, "aims to investigate allegations of inappropriate conduct by teacher Desiree Johnson in her treatment of the minor Ethan Reynolds." The Reynolds lawyer stood up immediately. "Mr. Chairman, our client was a victim of verbal assault by the accused. An 8-year-old child was psychologically attacked by a teacher who was supposed to protect him, not humiliate him." Desiree felt Kimberly squeeze her arm in a gesture of support. "Ms. Johnson," said the committee chairman, "would you like to present your version of the facts?" Desiree stood up and took a deep breath. She had rehearsed that moment dozens of times in her mind. "Gentlemen," she began, "on the day in question, I was conducting a normal lesson when student Ethan Reynolds stood up, violently pulled my hair, called me a racial slur, and said I shouldn't be there. All of this in front of 28 other children." "That's a lie," shouted Margaret Reynolds. "My grandson would never—" "Mrs. Reynolds," interrupted the chairman, "please remain silent. You will have an opportunity to speak later." Desiree continued, "After the incident, I calmly spoke with the student, explaining that such behavior was unacceptable. Subsequently, in a meeting with the guardians, I tried to discuss ways to prevent similar situations from happening again. And during that meeting," interrupted the Reynolds lawyer, "you verbally attacked my clients, elderly and respectable people, making unfounded accusations about the upbringing they provide for their grandson." "I questioned," corrected Desiree, "where an 8-year-old child had learned such specific racist words and behaviors, and I suggested that the guardians talk to him about respect and consequences." "You were clearly out of control," continued the lawyer. "A teacher cannot attack a family in this manner, especially elderly people who have dedicated their lives to raising an orphaned child." Desiree felt her anger rising, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Gentlemen," she said, addressing the committee, "I was physically and verbally assaulted by a student because of my skin color. When I tried to discuss the seriousness of the situation with the guardians, they denied there was any problem with the child's behavior. More than that, they suggested I should be transferred to avoid misunderstandings." "That is not true," protested Richard Reynolds. "Mr. Reynolds," said the chairman, "you will have your turn to speak." Kimberly, the union representative, asked for the floor. "Mr. Chairman, I would like to remind everyone that teacher Desiree Johnson is a veteran of the U.S. Army, decorated for services rendered in international peacekeeping missions. Her conduct has always been exemplary, both in military service and in education." "That is irrelevant," said the Reynolds lawyer. "It does not matter what the accused's previous career was. What matters is that she verbally assaulted a child and a family." "A child," interrupted the union lawyer, "who had just physically and verbally assaulted the teacher. And a family that, instead of addressing the child's inappropriate behavior, chose to attack the victim." The discussion continued for over 2 hours. Margaret and Richard told a completely distorted version of the facts, painting Ethan as an innocent victim and Desiree as an out-of-control aggressive teacher. "My grandson," said Margaret with tears in her eyes, is a sweet and caring child. He might have pulled some childish prank like any kid, but he would never do what this teacher is saying. And even if he had, her reaction was way over the top and traumatizing. What prank? Asked the union lawyer. Do you consider a racial assault a prank? My grandson is not a racist, Richard Reynolds yelled. He was raised by us good Christian hard-working people. This accusation is absurd. Then how do you explain the words he used? The lawyer insisted. Words that the teacher herself might have made up to justify her assault, answered the Reynolds lawyer. Desiree felt as if she'd been punched in the gut. She was being accused of inventing the racial assault she had suffered. Gentlemen, she said, unable to control the emotion in her voice, I have dedicated my life to serving my country. I lost my only daughter in the line of duty. I became a teacher to honor her memory, to make a difference in children's lives. Do you really think I would make up a story like this? For what? For victimhood, the Reynolds lawyer answered coldly. Unfortunately, it's a common tactic these days. The silence in the room was broken only by the sound of Desiree trying to control her breathing. She was being accused of lying about racism to play the victim. It was the worst kind of violence she could endure. Ms. Johnson, said the head of the committee, do you have anything else to declare? I do, said Desiree, standing up slowly. I would like you all to know that in 28 years of adult life, 19 of them in military service and 3 in education, this is the first time I have had to defend myself against accusations about my professional conduct. There has never been any complaint about my behavior, never any disciplinary issue. She paused and looked directly at the committee members. But more important than that, I would like you to think about the 28 children who witnessed what happened in that classroom. What will they learn if the teacher who was assaulted is punished and the child who assaulted her faces no consequences? What will the black children learn about their own worth? What will the white children learn about respecting others? Ms. Johnson, the chairman interrupted, you are making a political speech. No, sir, Desiree interrupted. I am talking about education. And education has always been and always will be a political act. The hearing ended without a resolution. The committee said it would need a few weeks to review the testimonies and reach a decision. Leaving the Department of Education building, Desiree felt exhausted and defeated. Kimberly tried to cheer her up, saying she believed the truth would prevail, but Desiree wasn't so optimistic. Kimberly, she said as they walked to the parking lot, do you really think I have a chance of getting out of this? I do, Kimberly replied. They have no proof of anything they're claiming, and your record is impeccable. But they have influence, and I'm just a black teacher who dared to defend herself. Desiree, don't talk like that. You have support, you have the union, you have the parents, you have your colleagues. Some colleagues, Desiree corrected, and some parents, not all. But the ones who support you are the ones who matter. They're the people who know your work, who know who you are. Desiree wanted to believe Kimberly's words, but it was hard. She had spent her life believing that effort and dedication would be enough to overcome prejudice. Now, at 40 years old, she was discovering that sometimes they weren't. That night she called her mother. How did it go, honey? Hard, Mom. Really hard. Desiree told Eleanor every detail of the hearing, and Eleanor listened in silence. Daughter, said her mother when she finished, do you remember when you were little and you asked me why some people didn't like us? I remember. And do you remember what I answered? You said that some people learned to hate because it was easier than learning to understand. And did I say anything else? Desiree smiled, remembering the conversation they'd had when she was 9 years old, about the same age as her current students. You said that our job was to show those people that they were wrong. Not by shouting, not by fighting, but by being so good at what we do that they couldn't ignore us. And that's what you've done your whole life, daughter. In the army, at school, everywhere you've been. You were so good they couldn't ignore you. But now they're trying to silence me. They are trying, agreed Eleanor, but they won't succeed. Do you know why? Why? Because you are my daughter, and my daughter doesn't give up. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The following week, Desiree received an unexpected call. It was from Marcus, a journalist from the local newspaper. "Ms. Johnson, my name is Marcus Washington. I'm a reporter for the Daily Herald. I'm working on a story about the case involving you, and I would like to hear your side." Desiree hesitated. She wasn't sure if it was a good idea to expose the case to the press. "How did you find out about the case?" "An anonymous source contacted us, said an injustice was being committed at the Department of Education." "Can I know who?" "I can't reveal their identity, but I can say it's someone who witnessed the hearing." Desiree decided to tell her side of the story to the journalist. If the case was going to become public anyway, she at least wanted to make sure the truth was known. The article was published 3 days later on the front page of the local newspaper. The headline was, "Decorated Veteran Teacher Accused of Racism After Suffering Racial Attack." The report told the whole story, from the incident in the classroom to the hearing at the department. Marcus had also spoken with parents of students who confirmed Desiree's good work, and with veterans who had served with her in Haiti. The reaction was immediate. Desiree's phone didn't stop ringing all day, with calls of support from strangers, human rights organizations, and other teachers who had been through similar situations. But there were also negative reactions. Some people called to insult her, saying she was playing the victim and making a big deal out of nothing. The story reached social media and spread quickly. Within days, Desiree's case was being discussed in educator groups across the country. Margaret called, clearly upset. "Desiree, did you see the article?" "I did." "You shouldn't have spoken to the press without consulting the school first." "Why?" asked Desiree. "I only told the truth. But now the school is being shown in a negative light. The department is furious." "The school is being exposed because it allowed an unjust situation to get to this point," replied Desiree. "If you had supported me from the beginning, none of this would have happened." "Desiree, you need to understand there are consequences." "There are consequences, yes," she interrupted. "And one of them is that now everyone can see how you treat teachers who suffer racist attacks." 2 days after the article was published, Desiree received a call that would change everything. It was from Anthony Watson, a war veteran who had read the report. "Ms. Johnson, my name is Anthony Watson. I served in Haiti around the same time you did." "What time exactly?" 2010. I was there during the operation when that attack happened that killed several U.S. soldiers." Desiree's heart raced. "The attack where Jasmine had died. You were there?" "I was. And I wanted you to know that I remember the work you did there very well. You saved many lives that day." Desiree closed her eyes, trying to control the emotions the memory always stirred. "Mr. Watson, may I ask why you're calling?" "Because I read the newspaper article and I was outraged. A woman who served her country with such honor does not deserve to go through this. And because I know someone who can help you." "What do you mean?" "My brother is a lawyer specializing in human rights. He became interested in your case and would like to offer his services for free." Desiree couldn't hold back her tears. Finally, someone who understood what she had been through, both in the war and now. "Mr. Watson, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything, teacher. Just accept our help. You deserve justice." Dr. Edward Watson, the lawyer, contacted Desiree the next day. He was a man in his 50s, experienced in cases of racial discrimination, and he was extremely outraged by the situation. "Teacher Desiree," he said during their first conversation, "this case has all the elements of institutionalized racial persecution. You were the victim, but you're being treated as the guilty one." "Dr. Edward, do you think I have a chance of winning?" "I'm sure of it. But more than that, we are going to sue both the family and the school for emotional damages. What they did to you is unacceptable." With the new lawyer joining the case, the dynamic changed completely. Edward requested all documents related to the process from the Department of Education, including the recordings of the hearing. He also began collecting testimonies from witnesses who could help Desiree. One of these witnesses was Jasmine, the 9-year-old student who was in the classroom when the incident happened. With her parents' permission, she gave a special testimony. "Jasmine," said Edward gently, Can you tell me what you saw on the day Ethan pulled Teacher Desiree's hair? He got up out of nowhere, said the girl, her voice firm despite her young age. He pulled her hair and shouted ugly things. The teacher didn't do anything to him. She was just explaining math. And how did the teacher react? She stayed very calm. She didn't yell at him, she didn't get angry. She just told him to sit down and that they would talk later. Was the teacher ever mean to Ethan at any point? No. She was always nice to everyone, even to him, and he could be kind of annoying sometimes. Jasmine's testimony was crucial to proving Desiree's version. Other children were also heard, and they all confirmed the facts in the same way. Meanwhile, public opinion pressure continued to grow. The teachers' union organized a rally in support of Desiree, which brought hundreds of educators in front of the Department of Education. Tamika, Destiny's mother, was one of the organizers of the rally. "We cannot accept that teachers are persecuted for defending themselves against racism," she said, addressing the crowd. "Teacher Desiree is an example to all of us. She showed our daughters that they don't have to accept disrespect in silence." The rally received wide press coverage and increased the pressure on the department to resolve the case quickly. 3 weeks after the initial hearing, Desiree received a call from the department scheduling a new hearing. This time, it would be a mediation session with a mediator present. "Teacher Johnson," said Edward, "they want to settle. This means they know they don't have a case against you." "What kind of settlement?" "They will probably offer your return to work without punishment, but ask that you drop the lawsuit against the school." "And Ethan's family?" "That is a separate matter. We can sue them for emotional distress regardless of what happens with the school." At the conciliation hearing, the atmosphere was completely different from the first one. The representatives from the Department of Education seemed much more respectful, and even Margaret was present, with a visibly uncomfortable posture. The mediator, a retired judge named Dr. Robert, conducted the session impartially. "We are here," he began, "to try and reach a solution that is satisfactory for all parties, Ms. Johnson, would you like to present your demands?" Edward stood up. "Your Honor, our client demands, first, immediate reinstatement to her job without any punishment or warning on her record. Second, a public apology from the Department of Education. Third, the implementation of an anti-racism program in all public schools in the district." The Department of Education's representative, Dr. Charles, seemed surprised by the demands. "Mr. Edward, some of these demands are excessive. The reinstatement without a doubt can be agreed upon, but a public apology—" "It's the least you can do," Edward interrupted, after subjecting an exemplary teacher to a humiliating process for being the victim of a racial assault. "And what about the anti-racism program?" asked the mediator. "It's a fair demand," Edward replied. "This case shows there is an urgent need for education about diversity and respect in the public schools." Dr. Charles requested a recess to consult his superiors. During the break, Margaret approached Desiree. "Des," she said, visibly uncomfortable, "I wanted you to know that I deeply regret the way I handled this situation." "Margaret, no, let me speak. When this all started, I only thought about avoiding problems for the school. I didn't think about you as a person, as a professional, as a victim, and that was wrong. Thank you for acknowledging that, Margaret. And there's one more thing. Since you left, the school hasn't been the same. The teachers are demotivated. The kids ask about you every day, especially Destiny. She's not doing well." Desiree's heart tightened upon hearing about Destiny. "What do you mean she's not doing well?" "She stopped participating in activities. She doesn't talk to anyone. Her mother is worried. I think she blames herself for what happened." "Why would she blame herself? Kids think differently, right? She might be thinking that if she weren't black, you wouldn't have left the school." Desiree felt devastated. The girl was carrying a guilt that wasn't hers, learning that her identity brought negative consequences for the people she loved. When the hearing resumed, Dr. Charles returned with a proposal. "We can accept the immediate reinstatement of Ms. Johnson to her job without punishment. Regarding the apology, we can issue an official note acknowledging that the process was unnecessary. And about the anti-racism program, we can implement some diversity lectures." Edward did not seem satisfied. Dr. Charles, some lectures is not a program. We are talking about a structural change in how the school district handles discrimination issues. But that would involve costs, training, curriculum changes. Exactly, said Edward. That's what needs to be done. The mediator intervened. Gentlemen, let's try to reach a middle ground. What if the Department of Education commits to implementing a pilot program for diversity education, starting with 5 schools, including Ms. Johnson's school? Dr. Charles consulted his superiors again, and after a few minutes agreed to the proposal. We have an agreement, said the mediator. Ms. Johnson, do you accept the terms? Desiree looked at Edward, who nodded positively. I accept, she said, but with one additional condition. Everyone seemed surprised. What condition? Asked the mediator. I want to participate in developing the diversity education program, and I want it to include training not just for students, but also for teachers, staff, and families. Dr. Charles seemed to hesitate, but ultimately agreed. All right, we have a complete agreement. When she left the hearing, Desiree felt relieved, but also apprehensive. She had won an important victory, but she knew the real challenge would be returning to school and dealing with the consequences of everything that had happened. Edward reassured her. Ms. Johnson, you did much more than defend your rights. You set an important precedent. Other teachers who go through similar situations will have a path to fight. Dr. Edward, do you really think things will change? I do. Real change takes time, but it always starts with someone who has the courage to say, I won't accept this. And that's what you did. The next day, Desiree returned to Frederick Douglass Elementary School. She arrived early, as she always did, wanting a few moments of peace before the children arrived. Margaret greeted her at the school door. Welcome back, Jo. Thank you, Margaret. How are things around here? Different. Very different. There's a letter waiting for you on your desk. Desiree went to her classroom and found a letter written in a child's careful handwriting. It was from Destiny. Ms. Johnson, I missed you so much. I thought you had left because I'm black like you, but my mom said you left to fight for us. Like a superhero. You are my favorite superhero. Come back soon. Destiny Williams. Desiree sat in her chair and cried. She cried for everything she had been through, for all the children who had suffered from her absence, for all the times she had doubted herself. When the children arrived, the welcome was emotional. One by one, they entered the classroom and ran to hug her. Destiny was the last to enter, but when she saw Desiree, she ran and threw herself into her arms. Teacher, you're back, said the girl with tears in her eyes. I'm back, sweetheart, and I'm not leaving ever again. Are you a superhero? Desiree smiled, remembering the letter. No, Destiny. I'm just a teacher who loves you all very much. But you know what you are? What? You are a very brave and very special girl, and your skin color is beautiful. Yours too, teacher. In that moment, Desiree knew that the entire struggle had been worth it. During the following months, the school underwent a gradual transformation. The diversity education program was implemented with Desiree's active participation, and she became a reference for anti-racist education in the region. The children participated in activities that celebrated American cultural diversity, learned about the history and contributions of black people in the country, and developed projects about respect and equality. The teachers participated in workshops on how to identify and combat racism in the classroom. Some resisted initially, but gradually came to understand the importance of the topic. Families were invited to lectures and activities about diversity. Participation was small at first, but grew as positive results became visible. Destiny flourished during this period. She started actively participating in class again, made new friends, and became one of the natural leaders of the class. More importantly, she started smiling again. 6 months after the incident, Desiree received an unexpected letter. It was from Ethan. The letter was written in a still childish handwriting, but the words were surprisingly mature. Ms. Johnson, I know I did a very bad thing to you. My therapist said the words I used hurt people a lot. I didn't know that before. Now I know that all people are equal, and that skin color doesn't matter. I wanted to apologize. Ethan. Along with the letter came a note from a woman who identified herself as a child psychologist. Ms. Johnson, Ethan has been in treatment with me for 4 months. His grandparents sought help after they noticed he had become very aggressive and sad after school. During the treatment, we worked extensively on the issue of prejudice and its consequences. The boy has shown genuine remorse and a desire to change. If you agree, I would like to schedule a meeting so he can apologize in person. Dr. Patricia Brooks. Desiree spoke with Edward about the possibility of the meeting. He was initially hesitant. Ms. Johnson, you have no obligation to accept, and it could be an attempt by the grandparents to improve their image in the lawsuit we filed. It could be, Desiree agreed, but it could also be a real opportunity for education. If the boy has really changed, maybe it's worth trying. The decision is yours, but if you decide to accept, I would like to be present. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at the school itself. Present were Desiree, Edward, the psychologist, Ethan, and to everyone's surprise, only Margaret. Richard did not come. The boy seemed very different from the aggressive child who had pulled Desiree's hair months before. He was visibly nervous, looking at the floor, but when he spoke, his words came out clear and sincere. "Ms. Johnson," he said, still not looking her in the eyes, "I wanted to apologize for what I did. I know I hurt you and that it was very wrong. Dr. Brooks explained to me that the words I used make people sad and angry. I didn't want to make you sad." "Why did you do that, Ethan?" Desiree asked gently. "Because—" The boy hesitated and looked at his grandmother. "Because I heard at home that people like you were different. But I didn't really understand, and I thought different was bad. And now, what do you think? Now I know that people are people, and that you are a good teacher. Dr. Brooks told me that you were a soldier and saved many people in the war." Desiree was surprised. The psychologist had researched her. "It's true, Ethan. I served my country as a soldier before becoming a teacher. And you lost your daughter in the war, right?" the boy asked, this time looking into her eyes. The question caught Desiree off guard. She felt her eyes fill with water. "It's true." "Then you know what it's like to be sad when someone does something bad to you." "I do, Ethan. I wanted you to know that I've learned, and if you let me, I want to be your student again. I will behave well, I promise." Desiree looked at Edward, who nodded discreetly. She looked at the psychologist, who smiled encouragingly. She looked at Margaret, who for the first time seemed genuinely remorseful. "Ethan," she said finally, "I accept your apology, and I am happy to know that you have learned. But you have to understand one thing. Respect isn't something we promise to do. It's something we do every day with all people." "I understand," said the boy, "and I will. Every day." Margaret asked to speak. "Miss Johnson," she said, her voice choked, "I also want to apologize, not just for what my grandson did, but for what I did afterward. For what I said at the school meeting, for the way I treated you." "Mrs. Margaret, no, let me speak. During these months I've had a lot of time to think, and I realized that I taught Ethan things I shouldn't have taught him, things I learned when I was young and never questioned." "What made you change your mind?" "Dr. Brooks talked to me too. She explained to me how children learn prejudice, and it made me think about what kind of grandmother I wanted to be, what kind of person I wanted Ethan to become." Margaret dried her eyes with a handkerchief. "And there's one more thing. My husband, Richard, he didn't want to come today. He's too proud to admit he was wrong. But I'm not. I was wrong, and I want you to know that." The meeting lasted just over an hour. At the end, Ethan asked if he could give Desiree a hug. She agreed, and when the boy hugged her, she felt that it was one of the most important moments in her career as an educator. "Ms. Johnson," he said before leaving, "when I grow up, I'm going to tell my kids that you're a hero, and I'm going to teach them to respect all people, like you taught me." 2 weeks later, Ethan returned to school. His return was carefully planned by the administration, with psychological support and constant monitoring from Desiree. The other children were initially suspicious, especially Destiny Williams, but gradually, as they saw that Ethan had truly changed, they began to accept him back into the group. The boy kept his promise. He became one of the most respectful students in the class, and often defended classmates who suffered any kind of bullying or discrimination. 1 year after the original incident, Frederick Douglass Elementary School had become a model for inclusive education in the region. The diversity education program, developed with Desiree's participation, was implemented in all schools in the district. Desiree received several invitations to speak at conferences on anti-racist education and became a national reference on the subject, but she always made a point of saying that her place was in the classroom with her children. At one of these conferences, she met other teachers who had gone through similar situations. Together, they created a support network for educators facing discrimination. Education, she said in a particularly memorable speech, isn't just about teaching math, English, or science. It's about shaping human beings, and human beings who respect each other are the foundation of a more just society. Destiny Williams, who was already in the 5th grade, became one of the school's most active students in diversity projects. She and Ethan, surprisingly, became friends and often worked together on presentations about respect and equality. "Ms. Johnson," Destiny said during one of these projects, "can you tell the class what it was like to be a soldier?" Desiree smiled. It was still difficult to talk about her time in the U.S. Army because of the painful memories related to the loss of Jasmine, but she had learned that sharing her story was important to inspire the children. "Well," she began, "being a soldier taught me that protecting people is one of the most important things we can do in life, and that we don't need a uniform or weapons to do that. Sometimes we protect people just by treating them with respect and dignity." "And did you save many people there?" asked Ethan. "I tried to save everyone I could," replied Desiree. "I didn't always succeed, but I always tried." "Is that why you protect us here at school?" asked Destiny. "That's why," confirmed Desiree. "You are my little soldiers now, and my job is to protect you and teach you how to protect yourselves." At the end of that school year, the school organized a closing ceremony with presentations by the children about what they had learned. Desiree watched, moved, as her children presented songs, dances, and poems about diversity and respect. The final presentation was a surprise. Destiny and Ethan went on stage together. "We want to tell a story," Destiny said into the microphone, "the story of a very brave teacher." "Once upon a time," began Ethan, "there was a teacher who had been a soldier and saved many people in the war. But she lost her daughter," continued Destiny Williams, "and became very sad. So she decided to become a teacher to take care of other children. One day," said Ethan Reynolds, "a very rude boy was mean to her because of her skin color. But instead of getting angry," added Destiny Williams, "she taught everyone that all people deserve respect." "And the rude boy learned," said Ethan, smiling, "and he became a better person." "And all the children at the school learned too," finished Destiny Williams, "and they lived happily ever after, respecting everyone no matter their skin color. The teacher's name," they said together, "is Desiree Johnson, and she is our hero." The entire audience stood up to applaud. Desiree, with tears in her eyes, went up on stage and hugged the two children. "You know," she said into the microphone, "that the real heroes of this story are you. You who learned, who changed, who chose to be better people. You who taught me that it's worth fighting for a fairer world." Richard Reynolds was in the audience. He hadn't attended school events for a long time, but that day he had made a point of going. When he saw his grandson on stage, talking about respect and equality, when he saw how Ethan had changed, his eyes filled with tears. After the presentation, he approached Desiree. "Ms. Johnson," he said with difficulty, I wanted to apologize." "Mr. Reynolds." "No, let me speak. I was wrong, very wrong, and I almost ruined my grandson's life because of my prejudices. The important thing is that Ethan learned. He learned because you didn't give up on him, because you looked beyond the rude boy he was and believed he could be better." Richard paused, clearly emotional. "I also wanted you to know that I served in the army. A long time ago, but I served. And when I found out you were a veteran, that you had served on peacekeeping missions, well, that made me think a lot about honor and dignity. Mr. Reynolds, we all deserve a second chance. You are a very generous woman, Ms. Johnson, and an exceptional educator. That conversation marked an important reconciliation. Richard began to support the school's activities and became an active advocate for the diversity education program. 3 years after the original incident, the transformation was complete. Frederick Douglass Elementary School had become a national example of inclusive education. Teachers from all over the country came to visit to learn from the program developed there. Desiree had received several awards for her work in anti-racist education, but the recognition she was most proud of came from her own children. "Ms. Johnson," said Ethan, who was now in the 6th grade, "you know I'll never forget what I learned from you." "What did you learn, Ethan?" "That being different makes us richer, not poorer, and that respecting people is the most important thing there is." "And you, Destiny?" asked Desiree to the girl, who was now 11 years old and had become a natural leader among her peers. "I learned that being black is beautiful," she replied with confidence, "and that I can be anything I want to be in life. Like you, who were a soldier and are now a teacher. You know that you are the ones who taught me the most important lessons." "How so?" asked the two children. "You taught me that forgiving doesn't mean accepting the unacceptable. You taught me that real change is possible when people want to learn. And you taught me that love always wins over hate." At that moment, looking at those two children who had grown so much, Desiree knew she had found her true purpose. After the loss of Jasmine, she had questioned whether she could still make a difference in the world. Now she knew it was true. Every child who learned to respect differences, every family that changed their prejudices, every teacher who trained to be more inclusive, was a victory. It was a way to honor the memory of her daughter, who had given her life fighting for the same values. At the end of that afternoon, when everyone had already left, Desiree stayed alone in her classroom, organizing materials for the next day. It was a ritual she had developed. These moments of silence at the end of the day helped her reflect on everything that had happened and mentally prepare for the challenges of the next day. Her phone rang. It was her mother. "Hi, honey. I saw the news report on TV about the awards you won. I'm so proud." "Thank you, Mum. But you know what makes me the proudest isn't the awards." "I know. It's the children. It's the children. Especially the ones who have been with me since the beginning of this journey. Desiree, do you remember what I told you when you were little? About our duty to show people they were wrong about us?" "I remember. You did that and so much more, honey. You didn't just show them they were wrong. You actually helped them change." Desiree smiled, feeling a deep peace in her heart. "You know, Mom, there are days I talk to Jasmine. In my thoughts, you know. And I tell her about the children, about the things we're achieving." "And what do you think she would say?" "I think she would say I'm on the right path, that I'm making the difference she would have liked to make if she were here." "I'm sure she would say that, honey. And she would also say she's proud of the mother she had." After the conversation with her mother, Desiree finished organizing her classroom and got ready to leave. As she turned off the lights, she took one last look at the empty desks, imagining how they would be full of life and learning the next day. As she walked down the dark school hallway, she thought about the entire journey she had traveled since that terrible day when Ethan pulled her hair. It had been a difficult path, full of pain, injustice, and moments of hopelessness, but it had also been a path of growth, of overcoming, of transformation, not just for her, but for an entire school community. She had proven to herself and to the world that it was possible to fight prejudice and win, not through anger or revenge, but through education, example, and love. As she left the school, Desiree looked back one last time. Tomorrow would be a new day, with new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. And she would be ready, as she always had been, to protect and teach her children. Because that's what made her a true heroine, not the medals she had won in the war, not the awards she had received in education, but the ability to turn pain into learning, injustice into an opportunity for growth, and hate into love. And as she walked home under the starry sky of Oakland, Desiree Johnson knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be, fighting every day to build a better world for her children, one classroom at a time. End of story. Now tell me, what did you think of the story of the teacher Desiree? Do you think she made the right decisions in confronting prejudice? Leave your opinion in the comments, and if you liked it, Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories like this one.